Imagine being sued $900,000 just for cutting down some trees in your own backyard. That's what happened to one couple in California, and today I'm here with an attorney who is helping sue the city. It's time to spill some sweet tea. Hello everyone and welcome back to the Sweet Tea series. Today I'm joined with my good friend Laura Beth Latimer. Did I say it right or is that too Russian for you?
It's a little Russian.
No!
It's Latimer.
Latimer.
Yeah, softy.
We were talking about how whenever we introduce each other, we've only done it with first names. This was a first time.
I can't pronounce it. Guajardo?
Guajardo.
Yeah, no. So all's fair in love and war.
Well,
we can't pronounce each other's names.
Well, thank you for joining me on the show today. So you're with the Center for the American Future, and I'll let you go ahead and describe the work that you guys do.
Well, simply put, we sue the government. We are public interest litigators, which means that we go into situations where the government is taking away someone's rights, and we sue the government to reestablish those rights. Oftentimes, the cases that we choose are ones that we've sought out. We say this is an area of law that we see development, that we see a future in litigation. Sometimes they just fall in our laps, though, and that's exactly what happened in this particular case. This one very much just fell in our laps.
Well, let's get into the case. What's happening here?
So there's a couple in California, in Oakland. Their names are Matt Bernard and Lynn Warner, and they have been together for over 20 years, finally bought a piece of property hoping to build their dream home in this little neighborhood just north of Oakland. It's actually in Berkeley. And as they were in the process of planning, COVID hit, so they're kind of deciding how they're going to build their house. COVID hits, and they start getting from the fire department these notices that say, hey, you've got to clear the deadwood off your property. Clear the deadwood, clear the deadwood. We're going to fine you $450 if you don't clear the deadwood.
And by deadwood, was this just stuff that was laying on the floor? Was it stuff that was still attached to trees that were planted in?
Some of both. So the notices themselves weren't clear. It was like, clear the brush. There's dead. That was the language. It was dead wood. And so they said, okay, well, let's go ahead and take out some of these trees then. Some of these trees are very visibly dead. So they cleared out some of the trees. Fire department came back and said, great, we'll rescind those fines that we fined you before. But, be mindful of the dead wood on your property. So they hired an arborist, said, this is a danger. So we need to know which trees need to come out. So they hired an arborist. Arborist identified 8 trees and said, yep, these ones are dangerous because they're falling over. It's a very steeply sloped piece of property. So these trees were growing at like a 45-degree angle out of the ground. These trees are falling over. Some of them have died from the drought. You just need to get those out of the ground as quickly as possible. And so they did. They took these trees out. They had some contact initially with the city, and there's some back and forth with the city about, hey, you probably need a permit to get rid of these trees. And some back and forth about when they applied for permits, and they were never notified that the permits were denied, but they removed the trees anyway. And fast forward 3 years with no contact from the city whatsoever, the city finally says, actually, we are going to fine you. We're going to fine you $915,000. And they said, what? We'd like to speak to the city council about this. Went to the city council, and the city council said, yeah, no, we need to make an example out of you, basically, is what the city council said. We need to show you that you can't just come into Oakland and cut down trees. And so we're going to make an example out of you. And they imposed the full $915,000 fine on these poor people.
Oh, my goodness. And it was interesting. Whenever you had described this case to me, I think I was imagining a larger plot of land to be able to have trees that weren't that. And then I look at it, I'm like, no, it's just like a neighborhood plot of land. Like, imagine a plot that a house would regularly be on in a regular standard neighborhood.
It's a quarter acre. It is like the standard size lot for a house in a residential neighborhood. Yeah. We're not talking about like acres and acres and acres of lot. It's just 0.26 acres.
Is that how does that compare to the price that they originally paid for that property?
So they paid $175,000 for it. It's worth almost just shy of $200,000 now.
Oh my
so
goodness.
The fine that was levied is like 5 times what they paid for the property.
That's just absolutely insane. Because again, whenever you think like huge fine, when you were originally describing it to me, I was thinking like, oh, well, it must be like some really nice piece of land or something to be able to warrant that kind of fine. But
yeah,
I mean, not that it would warrant that kind of fine to begin with. But yeah, classic example of city overreach.
Absolutely. And it's becoming more common. We get into our inquiry portal for CAF on an almost daily basis.
And CAF standing for Center of the American Future.
Yes, for the Center for the American Future. We have an inquiry portal. So actually, this is a good note for your listeners. If you are struggling with government interfering in your rights, go to our website, send us an inquiry. We'd love to talk to you about the things that the government's doing. But on an almost daily basis, we get questions and concerns about things that cities are doing, and a lot of those have to do with tree ordinances.
Do a lot of people think that it's going to be city related when you talk about suing the government? Because I think we think about like public interest attorneys, and we think like the really big like national level cases. But some of what I appreciate both you and then Chance, the director of the Center for the American Future, speak about is all of the tiny tyrants that are a mile away from you, and that they're the ones that are really affecting your day-to-day life.
Absolutely. It is. So the understanding that most people have about public interest litigation, most people know the ACLU, right? Some people know IJ, like if you're really on the Institute for Justice, but the ACLU kind of does their super big name federal cases. And we don't do, we do occasionally do super big name federal cases, but for the most part, our cases are those tiny tyrants. Like you said, for the most part, it's those people that are elected by, 900 people in your local city election that are passing these ordinances. Most of the time, those people aren't attorneys. Most of the time, those people aren't thinking in the context of, is this thing that I'm doing constitutional? Is this thing that I'm doing actually violating other even state level laws? It's not as though they come into these positions and say, with all this background and experience in drafting legislation, like we have our legislators at the state level. These are people that are just coming in and, it's your next door neighbor, Steve, who decided to run for city council. And now Steve gets to decide what you can do with your property.
And I do appreciate the type of work they do, because it's not just helping one family one time against a city. It's trying to set precedent so those kinds of instances of injustice don't happen to other families as well. But today I want to talk more about the tiny tyrants, because they are everywhere.
Rampant.
So what are some of the other cases of tiny tyrants and city cases that people might not know about?
So we have a saying in CAF, in the Center for the American Future, that has very much been adopted throughout, I think, the foundation, and that is, you don't hate local government enough. And most of the time it arises in the context of somebody racing upstairs to our offices on the 5th floor and saying, you will not believe what the city of fill in the blank is doing this week. And one of those examples is actually the city of University Heights, Ohio, is currently locked in litigation with a gentleman who is Jewish, and he has prayer rituals. He's an Orthodox Jew, prayer rituals that require at least 10 men to gather in one place and pray 3 times a day. And so he was hoping to do this at his home, and the city of University Heights has told him he can't collect these people to pray in his home because it violates a zoning ordinance. He can't pray in his own home. So
this would be the equivalent, I'm just thinking, like, for what most people could relate to. If I had people over for a dinner party to do, and we like pray before our meal, to me that sounds like a similar
Bible
kind
study.
of thing. Oh yeah,
like a weekly Bible study.
Like the one that I was at yesterday. That was more than 10 people there. We chat, we like prayer and everything together.
Precisely. But the city of University Heights says, no, now you've converted your home into a religious institution and you're not zoned for that. So you can't have
because your
these
house
people.
Isn't designated as a church.
Precisely. But here's the catch-22 of that. If they were to apply for a variance, become a religious institution, they could no longer live in their own home because of a separate city ordinance that says that you can't sleep in a religious institution. So you can't, you are either a home in which you can't pray or you're a church in which you can't live. Those are the options that University Heights is giving their residents. And it's just the most blatant violation of the First Amendment that I could possibly imagine. When the Constitution was ratified, when the First Amendment was ratified, most churches were in some capacity in homes. Of course, that's what the founders intended when they drafted the First Amendment, was to protect that exact practice. But University Heights has said, nope, our zoning trumps your First Amendment rights, and so you don't get to exercise your religious liberty in the way that you feel called.
It's still interesting to think about how that's something happening in America, because the first thing that I think about that's similar is in England, where they're having problems right now with people wanting to pray outside of abortion clinics. They were told, no, you can't do that. So there was a woman who was praying in her house, but her house happens to be too close to the abortion clinics, and now she was not able to pray inside of her own home.
Right.
So I think about those cases happening in different parts of the EU.
Yeah.
But that's actually happening in America. So I always think about those countries like, wow, it's so sad you don't have a First Amendment.
Yeah. Yeah, wouldn't it be nice? You guys could always adopt a constitution. You could do that, but yeah. But even with our constitution, this is something that has to be fought in court, and it will be fought in court because the city has decided this is a hill it's willing to die on. So that's University Heights, Ohio, and their silliness.
Well, I know you came prepared with a couple of different stories. So what are some other instances of local institutions just having a little bit of a power trip?
Well, let's bang on Ohio a little bit more. So a dear friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Christian Townsend, just won a case against Dayton, Ohio, because they had an ordinance that prohibited the distribution of food to people on the street. And a gentleman was arrested and prosecuted for handing out burritos to homeless people.
Wow.
Like literally all he was doing, not causing a ruckus, not causing, no traffic problems. He was parked legally, but he was handing burritos to homeless people. And the city of Dayton said, no, we're not, we don't want you doing that here. So even though he, in his own religious exercise and in his own First Amendment context, was handing burritos to these individuals, the city said, nope, you can't do that. We're not going to let you. It's just the tiny tyrants of Dayton saying, we're allowed to tell you what you can and can't do, up to offering food to the hungry.
It's interesting how a lot of these end up being religious kind of violations. So especially like you were just mentioning right now and alluding to, as Christians, that's one of the things that we're called to do.
Right.
And you have a city
saying,
saying,
we're here to feed the homeless.
Right. Yeah. Provide food to the hungry. And do you have a city saying, no, can't do that. I'm guessing, is that city a blue leaning city, I'm guessing, or the council?
I think so. I believe so. It's not always the case, but I think so, yeah.
So that's fair. I mean, you have tiny tyrants everywhere across the board.
At every level, yeah.
Yeah. But I do think it's interesting whenever components of the left, they try to paint conservatives as uncaring and uncharitable. And even whenever we get into arguments about taxes, it's usually like, oh, you just don't want to pay your fair share. You don't want to help people. But then you're getting attacked on the other side when you're actually taking time out of your own day to meet with people, see someone face to face and be the person interacting with the poor in your own community, and then being slapped on the wrist for that kind of activity.
Absolutely. And I mean, a classic example of this is Oakland. Oakland is one of the furthest left cities you could possibly imagine. And the couple in question, Mr. Bernard and Ms. Warner, are the sweetest, kindest. Mr. Bernard is a staunch practicing Catholic. They are not wealthy people by any stretch. Ms. Warner is a nurse. Mr. Bernard is a mathematician. They are not millionaires, right? They are just normal, ordinary people. And yet the city came along and said, this thing that you're doing, cutting down your own trees to build your family home, you're not allowed to do that. And we're not just going to fine you a little bit, like a reasonable amount, to show you that we're angry or to compensate for whatever loss to the community that these trees are. We're actually going to fine you so much that it hampers your entire ability to continue to survive. And on its face, Mr. Bernard and Ms. Warner are normal people. They're not those that should be punished. They're not criminals. They're just trying to live their lives. But
and be responsible citizens if the
right.
government
if the fire
entity
department
told
is correct,
them,
right. They got rid of that fire hazard. And yet this left-leaning city council is saying, in the most uncaring imaginable way, we're going to fine you just to make a point. We're going to show the world that we mean business. And in doing so, we're going to take it out upon this couple. So yeah, that kind of instinct, I think, that a lot of Democrats have in particular, that we're the party of compassion. Where's your compassion for Mr. Bernard and Ms. Warner? Where's your compassion for the gentleman who's handing out burritos on the street? Where's your compassion for those homeless people that are receiving them? It's just, it is mind-boggling how much cities have strayed from the foundations of our country, from liberty and from justice. And they're just saying, we're just going to do what we want to do. Because like you said, tiny tyrants.
So let's speculate just a little bit here. One of the things that I'm always thinking about is the fact that the left is really willing to step up and get involved in their communities, and they're the ones who are actually running for these local city elections and on the random boards that have more control over people and their lives than you would think. Why do you think that is, that the left is usually willing to get more involved than the right?
So I kind of take a a little bit of
back on
issue.
that. Yeah.
I'd push back a little bit on your premise. I do agree with it to a certain extent, especially in places like Austin. But like where I live up in Bell County, Texas, we find exactly the opposite, which is really the more conservative people especially are willing to run for school board, or they're willing to run for library board, or these very small
So I've just been in blue cities for too long.
I think you've been in blue cities for too long. But I also think too that there is a realization that there is a massive consolidation of power in cities. And I think probably that those who like power and like control are the ones who are going to be drawn to those positions, because that's where that opening is. It is easy to step into a position and take power. It is hard to step into a position and then say, I'm going to disperse this power and take it away from other people in the future. Which is, why when we talk about our founding fathers, one of the most powerful examples of that was George Washington, right? Stepped into that position of power and said, there is so much that I could take here, but I'm not going to, and released a lot of that. And we still carry those norms both inside and outside of the law with us. There aren't a lot of George Washingtons in city levels of government. And I don't know why that is. Probably because people just don't understand how important it is to have not power hungry people in those positions. But I don't know.
And I do think for the most part, you're living your life with your family, and it's something that you put off into the background. But that's one of the things I've been wanting to do with this show is talk to ordinary people and say, hey, here's an issue. Maybe there's something that you would want to do about it. There's a friend of, both the show and of the foundation, Bogdan, I don't even know his last name. He goes by... what is it on Instagram? Immigrateful. So he does a lot of, he's from Romania, does a lot of work on like what good legal immigration looks like, but also does a lot of other conservative commentary. And one thing that he's been doing in the Dallas area is he'll be the person who goes to the city council meetings and show up for all the local stuff. And he's always amazed that even in a city where you should have, like, even if you're a little bit outnumbered, that representation doesn't end up happening at the city council meetings. Not just the people elected, but the people who show up. So there'll be way more people on the left and then like maybe 2 on the right.
Yeah.
And he always brings up, he's like, I know people are going to say that we have jobs on the right and we have families and other important things. But like in one video, he's
matters.
like, you can't tell me 5 people didn't have time to show up.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that even if it's as, a little group thing, just bring your friend and go together and
just
go
bring
figure
your friend
something out.
and go. I will say, with respect to city council meetings in particular, I don't know if you've ever seen the show Parks and Rec.
Oh, yes.
So the scenes dealing with the public hearings in that show, especially in the first season, are kind of painfully accurate sometimes. Like, I don't know if they just popped a camera in front of an audience somewhere in rural America, but like that is sometimes how they go. That's where the crazies go to air their grievances, and that might be why we see more liberals there than conservatives. but honestly, because that's where the crazies concentrate, that's the kind of law that gets made, because those are the people that the city councilmen are listening to. And so you end up with the crazies dragging the whole party. So if you are not a crazy, go. Make your voice heard. Don't be the crazy that's there. And outweigh those crazies, at least to whatever extent you possibly can. Because we don't have time for this nonsense anymore.
Well, there's a lot of big fights, state, local, federal level. What encourages you to do the type of work that you do, especially whenever that can seem so overwhelming and daunting?
The fierce hope that change is possible. And I think one of the most beautiful things that I've seen in my lifetime has been the molding and changing of the U.S. Supreme Court. And what has followed kind of tangentially with that is the molding and changing of the inferior courts as well. So our circuit courts and our district courts. Because particularly as originalism has taken hold, we have reverted back to a place of truth and honesty and goodness. And that is filtering down our entire legal system. Where truth and honesty and goodness reign, justice prevails. And I think we are starting to see that actually change. And so what gives me the energy and the stamina and the desire and the drive to keep doing this is that sense of hope that it is possible for these things to change. It is possible for real meaningful limits to be placed on city governments. It is possible for real meaningful liberty to come in these avenues that previously we had just experienced nothing but tiny tyrants. So my answer to that is hope. I think there's a lot of reason to be hopeful as we look forward into the America of the future.
Well, you've mentioned the Supreme Court, and let's say there's someone who's not usually keeping up with what's happening at that level. Is there a podcast or something people can listen to?
There is. If you are interested in what CAF thinks about the Supreme Court, we have a podcast called Rightly Decided. I think we've got like 20 odd episodes now, breaking down particularly what the Supreme Court has done this session, but also talking a little bit about some things that the Fifth Circuit has done, because we are the Texas Public Policy Foundation. We care deeply about what the Fifth Circuit does. So we talk a little bit about the Fifth Circuit and what they have done. We talk a little bit about state courts and sometimes just other random things that come up. We talked a lot about Afro Man when that happened. But yeah, if you are interested in hearing conservative viewpoints and conservative takes, and specifically originalist takes on what the Supreme Court is doing this session, tune in to Rightly Decided. We release every Wednesday as of right now.
And if you're like me and until recently didn't even know that there were like a whole season that was like the Supreme Court drop season. Yeah. The drop season that all the nerds are watching, the legal nerds are watching, which apparently my husband's one of them. So he's been like,
I can't tell you how much that doesn't surprise me.
Yes, it makes a lot of sense. But yeah, you guys have an originalist perspective and are viewing it from that lens. So sometimes like comparing what you guys say to some other podcasts, it's a really interesting getting that different sides of it. So anyway, I'm really glad that you guys are doing that kind of work. And if people want to find out more about the Center for the American Future, or they're saying, you know, I didn't even know that I had someone who could help me fight against my local government, where is it that they can find you guys and inquire if they have something to send to y'all?
So we have a tab on the Texas Public Policy Foundation page. So if you go and click on our tab, you can read about our active cases there, but there's also a client inquiry portal that you can access. I don't know off the top of my head how that's labeled. I should have checked before the show. I'm sorry. But you can find our client inquiry portal, which is basically just a communicate with us tab on there, and it'll send a message. Actually, that message comes to me right now. I'm the one fielding those. And it'll give you the opportunity to just spell out like 500 words or fewer, tell us what's going on, and then we'll reach out to you and say, hey, tell us more. Talk to us more about the ways that you feel that your liberty is being infringed. So, yeah, we always enjoy those. We get more of them than I can handle by myself, quite frankly. But we get a lot of inquiries, and we are pleased as punch to see those come through.
Well, thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to be on the show.
Yeah, it's been so much fun.
For everyone who's interested, that's at texaspolicy.com, where they can find the tab with for the Center for the American Future, send in some inquiries, and maybe just say hi to Laura Beth in one of those.
That's
I don't know.
True. You could do that. It would
and tell her how
me.
much you love her on the podcast.
Aww.
Or you can tell Chance during the end of the year during bonus season, be like, see, Chance, here's all the people.
Everybody loves me, Chance. You need to pay me more money. I'm just kidding.
Well, thank you so much again for taking the time. For everyone else, thank you for joining us, and I'll see you next time.